We provide a service that transcends not just the physical, but also the emotional, the energetic, and even the spiritual if you're into that. And it's valuable. And it's why yoga is $1 billion industry, which is crazy because the people who are at the forefront of this industry are oftentimes the people who are not getting paid.
Welcome to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Rekha and I am your host. I hope you're having a great day. I am recording this intro as I get ready to fly to Mexico for the week. I am finishing up the 200-hour teacher training assistant role that I've been holding for the last 2 months. I've been traveling to Oakland every other weekend almost, and the final section of this 200-hour teacher training program is 1 week in Mexico. So I will be assisting the teacher training in Mexico as well as assisting with like a retreat organization as well. So I am excited to go to Mexico. Also excited to complete this journey of assisting my first 200-hour teacher training with my dearest, best teacher, Annie Carpenter. So I am so grateful for this experience so far. I really feel like my teaching improved just by assisting this teacher training so much, just because I was able to fine-tune my teaching and really refine my teaching, just being around my teacher, Annie, and just observing how she teach her classes as well as how she teach and lead a teacher training program. It's just been amazing. I feel like I gained so much and learned so much and became a much better teacher just by being around her energy. So very, very grateful and very excited to go to Mexico and complete this experience. So before we get started on today's podcast, I want to tell you about my mentorship. I started this mentorship program a couple years ago, thinking about how I felt when I first became a new teacher. After coming out of 200 hours, I felt like I was on my own. I really didn't have that much support and really didn't know who to reach out to, who to look up to, who's doing something that I wanted to do, being a full-time yoga teacher. And I had so many questions about how to be a full-time yoga teacher or how to be a yoga teacher and how to navigate workspace, how to navigate getting a job, how to navigate auditioning, how to navigate getting a raise, how to navigate creating your own business cards, how to make your own website, how to think about my yoga business. All of these things. I just had so many questions, and I wish I had a mentor that I could go to with my questions, concerns, and challenges. I wish I had community that I can bounce my ideas around to see if anybody else is experiencing a similar challenges that I was experiencing. So this is the reason why I created my mentorship program a couple years ago. I wanted to provide a safe space, welcoming space for teachers to come together and support one another, encourage one another, celebrate one another. So we're not competing against each other, but we are rooting for each other and creating this beautiful community where we can also learn and continue our education about yoga, asana, meditation, philosophy, kind of all aspects of yoga. So that's why this mentorship program was born. And I am so happy with this natural progression of my community, of this mentorship. I just love every single person who's in it. I love the community we have built. I love how supportive everyone is. All to say, I can go on and on about my mentorship program, but all to say that I am opening up application for module 2 of my mentorship program, which starts from May until end of August. Module 2 will be 4 months long, and it is going to be completely virtual experience this time. We will meet on Zoom, live Zoom, 3 times a month. One is yoga philosophy discussion. We'll talk about Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Second one is Q&A session. Q&A session will be every other month. And another one is Teachers Yoga Asana class led by me. That's going to be every other month as well. There'll be practice teaching session for those who want to teach and improve their online teaching skills. And there'll be pre-recorded webinars or workshop or whatever you want to call it that I'll be creating and having it available to people in my mentorship group. This pre-recorded webinar, the topic includes yoga anatomy, body mechanics, business of yoga, how to set a healthy boundary, how to individualize practice and sequence for specific students and their needs. All kinds of juicy topic. So I am inviting you to join my mentorship group. If you go to my website, I'll leave the link on the show notes, but the website link will have an application button. So you're going to click the button and fill out the application form, because I want to make sure we are the right fit to work together and you are the right fit to be in this mentorship group, as well as I want to make sure you are ready to commit your time to this mentorship group. So if you have any questions, you are always welcome to write to me, message me on Instagram or through my website. I'm excited to learn more about you through this application form. So I'm ready to get this virtual mentorship program module 2 going. All right. Enough about my mentorship. Let's talk about this week's interview. This week I am interviewing my friend Darren, and I just have a huge respect for Darren because he does so many things. From my perspective, he looked like he have a thriving full-time yoga teacher business. He does private, he does corporate, he works for studio, he does events. He has his own online yoga studio. He's not only a yoga teacher, but he leads meditation, he leads breathwork, and he is also a sound facilitator. He does a lot of beautiful sound bath. He also leads retreat. So he just does it all. But I just love all the things he got going for himself, and it was so fascinating to hear his journey of how he is in where he's at right now. We see him now and see him as like a successful yoga teacher, but we don't become successful right away. There's usually a long journey to get to where we see someone as like a successful yoga teacher. So it was so interesting to hear his stories and his struggles that he went through, and some of the transitions and transformation he gone through to be where he is at right now. And I just have a huge respect for him. If you remember Karen from our first interview, he is leading a retreat with Karen this year. The retreat is already filled up, but I'm sure they'll do another one in the future. So him, Darren, and Karen, they collaborate to do retreats together. So I hope you can follow them so you can sign up for their retreat in the future or upcoming offerings or events in the future. So Darren is a space holder, artist, and movement teacher based in Orange County, California. He's dedicated to guiding individuals on a journey of self-discovery and holistic wellness. His approach is grounded in the fusion of modern research with insights from traditional Chinese medicine and Eastern medicine. Darren's personal health challenges led him to yoga and Eastern medicine during his teens, ultimately transforming his life after being diagnosed with fibromyalgia. This pivotal experience ignited his passion for exploring yoga, meditation, breathwork, and other healing modalities. Having undergone extensive training in yoga therapeutics, meditation, breathwork, and various yoga styles, including dynamic vinyasa and trauma-informed yoga, Darren is also pursuing a degree in traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. He views curating classes, leading meditations, and creating sacred spaces as an art form that he is deeply passionate about sharing. Darren's diverse work spans from individual client sessions to facilitating large events like weddings and corporate workshops. He has also been involved in educational roles, teaching yoga and mindfulness in schools and corporate settings, and leading retreats and workshops focused on holistic wellness practices. Darren's mission is to help individuals reawaken to their inner magic and potential through the integration of mind, body, and spirit practices. I hope you will enjoy the conversation I had with Darren, and I will speak to you on the other side. Welcome, Darren, for coming to join me on the Full-Time Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm very excited to speak to you, and thank you for your time for coming. Where are you logging in from today?
So I am in Costa Mesa. I actually just moved to Costa Mesa 2 months ago, so I'm settled in here and loving it so far.
Where are you from? Are you from Orange County?
Yeah, so I grew up in Los Angeles. I actually grew up outside of LA, Pasadena, Arcadia area specifically. And I was living there actually for a few years, and now I'm back in Orange County and I feel really good about it.
Yeah. And how long have you been teaching yoga for?
So I have actually been teaching yoga full time since 2018. So I think I'm going on 6 years of teaching yoga full time. It feels like it's been longer, but yeah, 6 years.
Definitely. Whenever people ask me that, it feels like it's been like over decades for me. But for me too, I think I'm about 8 years, but it feels a lot longer.
Yeah.
Were you teaching part-time before you became a full-time?
So actually out of my yoga teacher training, I left my corporate job and I did not have any sources of income whatsoever. And so I was leaning on becoming a full-time yoga teacher outside, of my training. And so right from the get-go after my training, I started teaching at LA Fitness full-time, and I tried to pick up as many classes as I could.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds very similar to my journey as well. I started teaching right away after teacher training. I started even emailing places before I graduated just so I can have something lined up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was emailing places too and applying for places, not having a certification yet, just so I can get the ball rolling as soon as possible. Because there was definitely a time crunch for me on the need to sustain myself with yoga.
Yes, definitely. So tell me, before teacher training, how long have you been practicing yoga, and what planted a seed in your mind about wanting to become a yoga teacher?
So this is actually really funny because this is something that I talk about a lot, but I was actually not practicing yoga at all before my teacher training. I would practice meditation. I was kind of familiar with it, but I definitely wasn't well versed in the practice. I think the thing and the seed that planted teaching yoga full time was experiencing meditation. And so actually the first style of yoga I ever practiced was Kundalini yoga. And so the yoga that I teach now is very far from that. And I actually had an insight when I was in a Kundalini class, and the insight was like, you need to teach yoga full time. And it was funny because I never practiced really asana. I only really practiced breathwork, mantra, Kundalini, as you know, is a practice which is very far off from a lot of the yoga practices that we practice in the West. And so I kind of made a huge jump. I remember going on Google and searching the nearest yoga teacher trainings for me. And I think at the time, this was in 2017, there was YogaWorks, Core Power, and Raw Yoga. And Raw Yoga was the closest studio to my house. I signed up for the training after going and meeting the owner of the studio, Jenny, and kind of just had an inkling feeling that this was what I was supposed to do. And I signed up for the training. I quit my job at the exact same time. And so during the training, I was pretty much taking 3 yoga classes a day, really dedicating myself to the practice. But prior to that, I really did not have any experience doing yoga, which is really funny because I feel like so often I hear, especially with a lot of yoga teachers, is that I've been practicing yoga for years and I finally felt like I had the itching and the calling to become a yoga teacher. And for me, it was actually not the case. I actually did not know anything about yoga asana or vinyasa or a lot of the yoga that I teach now. And so, yeah, my path to yoga was very weird.
But that path brought you to the right path, it seems like.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't have had it any other way.
Yeah. So you did raw teacher training in Irvine. And
Yes,
what was the
Irvine.
teacher training structure like? How long was it? How often did you meet?
So it was a 12-week, 200-hour teacher training. We met every single weekend, Saturdays and Sundays. Our Saturdays were 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and our Sundays were 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. And so that was 12 weeks. So 3 months of my life, I was completely dedicated to becoming a yoga teacher.
And you said you quit your job right before the teacher training started. So what were you doing before? And what made you quit? Even, you didn't wait till after teacher training. You were like, I'm quitting before the teacher training.
Yeah, so funny, and not a lot of people know this, but I actually used to work full-time in the cannabis industry. I was a manager at a cannabis dispensary, and for those of you that do not know, the cannabis industry was not legalized at the time. And so I was actually working anywhere between 14 to 16-hour days, 5 to 6 days a week, which is very much where I get my work ethic from, for those of you who know me. And obviously a yoga teacher training and that kind of lifestyle are two very, very different things. And it was completely unsustainable for me to continue working and also commit my weekends. Actually, right before I joined my training, I was working so much that I fell asleep driving to my grandmom's house on the freeway, and I woke up in a car accident. And when I woke up in the car accident, that was really the big thing where I was like, okay, like we all have those like forks in the road that make you have a realization about the life that you're living. And for me, it was definitely that. I was like, I can no longer continue doing what I'm doing because it has gotten me to a point where like my life is in danger. And after that, I was like, okay, like I need to completely just focus on this path and this door that I feel called to. And so I quit my job and basically survived off my savings until the end of my teacher training.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. Definitely, I had times where in college, when I was working 3 or 4 jobs to support myself, I remember like almost like many times, like almost falling asleep driving. And I was like, this is dangerous. It's not good. So
absolutely.
I'm glad that you had that realization. You like went full into teacher training. And you said from the savings you had from the previous job, you were able to kind of continue on with the teacher training. When you kind of shifted your lifestyle quite a bit, from quitting, working 14, 16 hours a day, quitting that and just jumping straight into teacher training. How was that shift and transition like for you?
I feel like it happened very suddenly. And when you're busy and working 16 hours a day, you don't really get the time to self-reflect and to slow things down, which is a lot of what we talk about in yoga. And so going from this kind of workload into a teacher training, which raw yoga teacher training is very spectacular in a way where it really embodies a lot of the yoga philosophy, and the knowledge of the chakras, and really a lot of this deep inner work that is often not talked about when it comes to yoga. And so coming from that and then moving straight into this, it was really an eye-opening experience, a heart-opening experience, but it was also very uncomfortable and very difficult because I was face to face with a lot of my own shadow and the responsibility that I had of doing this own inner work for myself so that I can also be this, not perfect, because I don't think that that's necessarily ever achievable. But I think when you're speaking in front of people and you're sharing yourself with a lot of people, there is this like level of responsibility that you have to take of ownership for your own shit. And I think the hard reality of all of the places that I had not worked on myself prior to this experience, that really started to sink in, which like there's so much duality in it, like the light of it and then also like the dark of it, and not necessarily saying that the dark is bad, but there was never an importance for me to take a look at that aspect of myself until I started my yoga teacher training.
Yeah. And it's so true. When you're so busy, we don't give ourselves enough time to like reflect, because we're just so busy working, or filling up our schedule. We forget there's not enough time to pause and reflect. Am I on the right path? Am I really following my intuition? Am I listening to my inner authentic self? So it seems like there was a lot that came out during your teacher training process, especially because you just kind of quit your job and you just were fully into that, immersed into that teacher training.
Yeah, definitely immersed.
So you finished, graduated after 12 weeks, and you said you started looking for a job before finishing because you already had in mind that you wanted to teach as a full-time coming out of 200-hour. And how was that transition like? Were you able to find enough teaching positions right away? How much were you putting yourself out there? What were some of the opportunities you did find?
Yeah, I remember this time of my life because of the mental state that I was in. And I think I was incredibly stressed on how I was going to make a living as a yoga teacher. And it's crazy because I feel like you see so many yoga teachers who are in abundance and living a life, and being a new teacher, it's almost like wanting to get to this point, but not realizing that there's a natural progression of it. And so right off the bat, I got hired at LA Fitness. That was my first yoga teacher job. And with LA Fitness, you can pretty much work at any LA Fitness location across California. And at the time, I was living in Orange County, but also living at my family's in LA. And I remember actually picking up yoga classes in LA when I was in LA, and in Orange County when I was in Orange County, driving from place to place, at the time making probably like 1/5 of what I'm making right now for a yoga class. It was incredibly difficult. And at the time, I was also trying to get hired at the yoga studio that I was working in, but I also realized that you need way more training than a 200-hour is going to provide to be able to really facilitate in a lot of different environments. And coming out of the yoga teacher training that I was in, and not to say Ross training isn't amazing, but I just think that there was this like need for me to deepen my education more so I can really offer the kind of yoga that I knew and I really felt was right to teach to a lot of the clientele that I had. And so there was definitely like a thirst for hunger for my education. And I actually continued my education and did a variety of other trainings, and also decided that I wanted to come back and assist the 200-hour training at Ross to help me solidify some of the information that I was learning, specifically with anatomy, just because I think anatomy is such a heavy concept and you don't really just get it in 200 hours.
Thank you for sharing that. Definitely 200 hours, no matter how amazing the training 200-hour program is, it's just the beginning for yoga teachers, right? That's just like a step in a door, and there's like whole field of more to learn, more trainings to be done, and like more we want to kind of like we want to keep observing like sponges, and 200 hours just the beginning. But you said you started teaching at 24 Hours Fitness right away, and you were subbing and teaching quite a lot, and I can really relate because I also was just teaching, trying to make it work. Do you remember how many classes you were teaching a week? You know, it doesn't have to be exact number, but about during that time.
Yeah, right out of the training, I remember week 2, I think I was teaching around 12 yoga classes a week at LA Fitness.
Wow.
And as I progressed, it definitely increased.
What is the most number of classes you have taught in a week?
So actually, the period of time where I was teaching the most in my life was when I got hired for the Irvine Unified School District. They have an elementary school in the district that really specializes in alternative education. And I got hired on as a full-time yoga teacher for that school, while also teaching my other yoga teacher jobs. And so I was working, teaching 25 yoga classes at that school full time, Monday through Friday. And then I would go and teach at the studio at night, which was around like 10 classes per week at the time. So the most I've ever taught in 1 week was 35 yoga classes.
That's a lot. And
yeah,
that is a lot.
I got to a point where I was actually like starting to lose my voice.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot. And I really applaud you for doing that. And a lot of yoga teachers say like, okay, like have a boundary, don't teach more than this number of classes a week, or 10 is the right number. And I get that. I understand that. But I also remember the time that I had to, and there was no other choice but to teach that many classes to be able to make it work, make a living. So I don't think it's wrong. I think it's some of us have to go through that, to really make it work. So I applaud you for that.
I feel like it's a learning curve, and you also really understand how to manage your own energy, what kind of environments you want to teach in. I think I was still trying to figure out the different environments that I wanted to teach in, and really where I felt like I could be the most of service. And I feel like through these experiences of really like running around Orange County and LA, I really felt like I found like where I needed to be.
Definitely, I want to ask more about that. But before, how did you find that school teaching job? That sounds like an interesting and not very like a typical conventional teaching job for yoga teachers.
Yeah, so actually one of my students, she was the previous yoga teacher at that school. And I remember my community project for Ross 200 hour, they do a thing where in the 200 hour, we really focus on giving back through the practice of yoga. And my first ever yoga class that I taught was for a nonprofit called Justice for Youth, which was basically children at risk in the city of Pomona. And I would teach yoga for them. And that was actually kind of what sparked the conversation of teaching yoga for kids. I also used to be a school tutor. That was my first job ever. I managed a classroom of fourth graders. And so being around kids was something that like I felt really good in. And then when this opportunity was presented to me, it was really like, oh, okay, like that seems like it would be the perfect fit. And she asked me, I interviewed with the school district, did background checks, everything like that, all of the stuff. Like this is a real full-time job, not just like I'm teaching at a yoga studio. I'm basically a PE teacher for the Irvine Unified School District. And yeah, I was onboarded and then I started working for them.
Wow. And what were the age group of the children that you were teaching?
So it was an elementary school. They did pre-K to sixth grade, and I would see first graders to sixth graders. I would see everyone in the school once a week.
Mm-hmm. And you said it was a full-time position. So was there benefits to that full-time position, like a typical 9-to-5 job?
Yes. There was benefits, PTO, you get a pension. I wouldn't just teach yoga there. Like I was basically on staff. I would help with recess duty. I would help when teachers needed somebody to be in their classrooms when they would take breaks. Mm-hmm. So I was very much involved and a part of the school system.
Mm-hmm. And what made you decide to move on from that position?
I think it was hard because I love teaching kids and I think it's really powerful what they're doing. And the biggest thing for me was I felt like I had a lot of creative potential, and where I wanted to take my business required me having to have more allotted free time in order to take care of myself. Of course, this is like just like another full-time job. And with yoga, I found that I really needed to have more flexibility in my schedule to be able to put in work to a lot of the other aspects of being a yoga teacher, which people don't really see, which is like looking for opportunities or creating events or having a good private client practice. And so really, I was at a turning point in my life where I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And I felt like the school system was something that was limiting me. And so eventually I ended up passing over the position to actually another yoga teacher at Raw.
Nice. And I'm curious to know, when you decided to really like full on pursue yoga as your full-time job during and after teacher training, how did your family and friends or friends react to you pursuing yoga as your main source of income? Was there any pushback or disapproval that you heard?
I feel like I'm very blessed and grateful to just have supportive family and friends in my corner. I definitely felt like the kook or like the black sheep of the family for pursuing this practice and all of the things that encompass yoga. I feel like as well, like health and wellness and self-awareness. And when you're, I guess, a yoga teacher, I think people start to label you and identify you as traits that, quote unquote, we assign to yoga teachers. So I definitely had to deal with a lot of that from my family and my friends, but it was never anything that was negative.
And I know you said you went on to do more trainings. And I know that now, from what I've seen, you do sound bath, you do breath work. So what kind of trainings did you pursue after the 200 hours teacher training?
So I did a lot of training in dynamic vinyasa, functional movement and mobility. But really, I feel like the most applicable trainings that I have now that really are applied to the work that I do were my trauma-informed yoga training that I did. I've also done a prenatal yoga training, a meditation training, a pranayama training, which is yogic breath work, and also yoga therapeutics. So yoga with myofascial balls, restorative yoga, yin yoga, a lot of the more subtle yoga practices. Those are the practices I felt like really have informed what I do now, which is sound baths, breath work. I work with a lot of individuals and also companies one-on-one and also in big group settings, really sharing like this aspect of yoga.
I love that. I love all the trainings that you've taken and how you're utilizing that. So take me through, how was your teaching life like before the pandemic and maybe during, and also how has it shifted now that it's after the pandemic?
Yeah, so right before the pandemic, I was teaching around 20 yoga classes a week. I feel like actually a lot of my friends and close people I know were teaching around that much. And so when the pandemic happened, it was really a big reality check, because when you work a job where you have to interact with people and suddenly that is completely taken away, it's a little scary. It's unstable because you don't really understand or know when is the next time we're going to be able to meet in person again. And so during the pandemic, gratefully, Raw Yoga, actually, we created a live stream program. And on this live stream program, I would teach yin yoga classes. At the time, we had a corporate office. We would go into the room by ourselves. We would have to disinfect everything, bleach everything, wipe everything down before and after we teach. And that was really what kept me in it. I think for many of us, we went through a really rough and transformative and deep time during the pandemic. But I think my yoga practice was the thing that kind of kept me in it. Kept me grounded through the experience. And so coming out of the pandemic was a huge transition. Especially I feel like I had so much self-realization on my workload and how much energy I'm giving to my classes. And also when you're teaching 25 classes, and I'm just saying this from myself and my own experiences, you can't really show up 100% for each and every class. And for me, I felt like that was doing like my students a disservice. And I really had to cut back and see, okay, how many classes do I actually have energy for? So that I'm not resentful of having to go teach this class or exhausted or half asleep when I'm literally providing an experience for a group of people. And for me, that was a huge, huge, huge shift. I went from teaching 20 classes a week to teaching 10 classes a week to teaching 8 classes a week to teaching 6 classes a week to now only teaching 5 classes a week, which was a huge, huge, huge transition. But there were also a lot of other aspects in my business life and my personal life that provided me the space to be able to transition into this and to really focus my energy on the areas that I really wanted to focus on, which is now my breathwork practice, my sound bath practice, my wellness business. And yeah, it all came from yoga.
Yeah, and that's amazing to hear that teaching from 25, how much you have slowly reduced. your teachings. And it's so true of what you just said about when you're teaching 25 classes a week. It's so hard to bring your full self and teach the best teaching that you can give in that class when you have to teach 25 classes a week, as compared to when you can you're only teaching 5, 6, even 10 classes a week. The energy you're able to actually invest and input it is a big difference for sure. So I'm very happy for you that you slowly made that shift. I'm sure it wasn't an easy transition.
Definitely
Yeah. And I know you said you teach about 5 classes a week now, but I know you have a lot of other things going on. So maybe tell us like what other things that fills up your schedule, what kind of teachings or, anything else.
Yeah, so I've really transitioned almost away from teaching at yoga studios and really have focused my yoga practice, specifically like my meditation, my breathwork, and my sound practice, working with individuals one-on-one. I have a few private clients that I see consistently on a weekly basis, and also working for different corporations. And so a big part of the work that I offer now is wellness, meditation, mindfulness for different corporations. And so I'm blessed and I'm lucky to work with a few companies who are really at the forefront of employee wellness. I feel like there's a huge shift in the way that people work and the way that people do business now, where a lot of companies are really focused on providing really healthy and balanced lifestyles for their employees. And so I've had the amazing privilege and opportunity to create wellness programs for different companies, to provide virtual sound baths, in-person sound baths, virtual breathwork sessions, to a lot of different companies. And so it's been really amazing to kind of see this switch and transition in the way that people work, I feel like, in the past few years.
Yeah, that makes me so happy to hear that, companies are definitely, I have seen the shift of certain company, not all, but companies really are caring about employees' wellness and bringing in practice like yoga or breath work, sound bath to their workspace for their employees. And it's so amazing. And I'm curious, and I know I can almost hear listeners thinking about this question is, how did you put yourself out there to find this wellness job opportunities in corporate setting?
Yeah, I feel like it's so funny because it's like I know, but then also I don't know. Like a lot of these opportunities kind of just find their way to me or fall in my lap. But I think in order to kind of like understand how I even got into the corporate wellness space and even like pioneering that is understanding that in my yoga teacher training, I'm going to like reel us back to little old Darren back in his 200 hour. I actually had the privilege of meeting 2 sound facilitators, intuitives and energetic healers who no longer work with Raw. But I actually was their personal assistant for 3 years. And when I was their personal assistant, I would help facilitate their sound experiences. I wouldn't actually help facilitate with the sound, but I was the personal assistant, so I'd help with check-in processes. I would help just make sure that the environment is completely running smoothly so that they can focus on the work at hand. And one of the things that they had me do was actually sit up while everybody is experiencing and journeying through sound and just sit in the room and observe the energy. And really, that was the thing that kind of helped me build this awareness of like how to hold space for people. On top of also the fact that I'm doing a lot of their marketing, I'm doing their emails, I'm helping them create different funnels and different channels to help build their clientele. And so it was really that experience which showed me not only the work, but also the nitty gritty in regards to like how you can really have a sustainable clientele and a sustainable business doing this kind of work. I think when people see that you are committed to doing something, especially I feel like at the time when I first started doing sound healing, there wasn't really a lot of facilitators. I find that when people see that you are committed and that you are continuously showing up to the practice, it really conveys this energy of, okay, Darren is the person I'm going to go to for sound baths. And really, with that being said, I feel like most of my clientele and most of my clients have come from word of mouth or a friend of a friend or referral. And I really feel like going back to just like individual experiences, like really making the effort to connect, and to convey the importance and really the value that these practices have is so important, because when I understand that for myself and I'm conveying that to one of my clients or somebody who has the privilege of like coming to a sound bath, they can feel that. And when they feel that, they want to share that experience with people that they love. Oh my goodness, this is how I felt from this experience. I really think that you would really benefit from this experience too. And so with that being said, I feel like all of those little things kind of play in a role to how this has expanded. I really can't say that like I have structure, but I feel like a lot of my life is just guided in a way where things just kind of happen naturally. I find that I have to like get out of my own way a lot of the time to receive.
Yeah.
Working on receiving and being in my feminine energy.
I love that. It's true. Like you like word of mouth and, people recommending each other or you're, recommending your service. Those are huge. It's probably the biggest and most important marketing tactic or method, because you never know what kind of, impact you had on somebody or how you present yourself professionally to your colleagues or your manager, your yoga teacher friends, or maybe your student. Like you just never know what kind of connection can lead you to maybe possible opportunity in the future. So it really matters that, being consistent and showing up, being professional. And also, like you said, people can probably tell that you have benefited from this practice so much. So when you're speaking about this practice or this teachings or offering that you have, they can tell the authenticity of like, oh, wow, I really want to experience that. Or, oh, wow, I really wish my friend or my workspace can offer this. Like you just never know what kind of dots can connect you to different opportunities out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Being embodied, I feel like, in the work. Of being a yoga teacher, of facilitating breathwork, facilitating meditation. I remember in my meditation teacher training, it was really funny because the teacher was like, so in order to teach meditation, I can't really teach you anything. The only thing that you have to do is meditate. And if you meditate, you'll be able to teach meditation. And I feel like with yoga and with breathwork and with sound, like that's really like such a simple phrase, but it's really so powerful because I feel like it really transcends the work, and then you become embodied in what you're doing. And then people can really feel like you teach from that lived experience. You teach from that embodied space of like how these practices have really settled in and work for you.
Yes, so true. I really resonate with what you said. That's amazing. So you said you were teaching at school in the beginning and studios and gyms, and that has slowly transitioned to less like public group classes and now more private and corporate, both in person and virtual. So what does your typical week of teaching look like these days?
Yeah, so I can just give like a rundown, I think, on my schedule, and it's always evolving and changing. There's times where I'm completely booked with private clients on the weekend. There's times where I'm not booked, and there's times where my schedule it's kind of all over the place, which I've grown to love and be okay with. And also now, obviously, we've come from seeing my experience of teaching 35 classes to 25 classes. I've definitely learned how to have more boundaries with my time and my energy, but I always try to be as flexible as possible, as anyone has to be in this kind of field where our work is service-based. So a lot of the times it's like we want to say yes all the time. But the way that my week kind of looks from a business standpoint is on Mondays, I facilitate breathwork for a nonprofit. Later in the lunchtime, I teach meditation for a corporate office. I teach 3 different yoga classes on this day. So Mondays is really like a huge day. I also teach breathwork at night on that day. So my Mondays is really long. I work like 8 hours. Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I pretty much have the day off completely. And these are like my admin days. These are when I create content for my virtual yoga studio. This is when I respond to my emails. This is when I do my bookkeeping, all of the nitty and gritty that, people don't see behind the scenes. Thursday, which is actually the day which we are recording this, I have 2 lovely private clients, which I work with in the morning. So I actually just came from there. Fridays, I teach 3 yoga classes and I teach a corporate meditation. And then usually Saturdays and Sundays are the days where I either have group sound baths, one-on-one clients. Sometimes I host events or do different like pop-up sound baths for different companies, or sometimes I just host them myself. And so that's kind of what my schedule looks like. And give or take, sometimes I remove things from my schedule. Sometimes my schedule is completely booked out, but it definitely ebbs and flows. It ebbs and flows.
Yes, definitely. Our schedule, like you said, is always changing and shifting. Week to week, it may look slightly different. And I think we're both similar in a way that we have a hard time saying no, and maybe we have a tendency to book up our schedule, fill up our schedule. Do you have any a designated day off that you don't work? Okay.
So I tend now, definitely, and sometimes I still, cross my own boundaries. I have Sundays off. I try to have Sundays off. If I do not get my Sundays off, I try to have the Saturday off. And so usually Saturdays or Sundays are one of the days that I have off. But as you know, and I feel like not even just being a yoga teacher, being an entrepreneur, it's even on your days off, you tend to work. There's always something. And I think even just like thinking about work is working. And so really unplugging from that is a practice which I'm still learning how to handle, which is funny, right? Because I'm a breathwork teacher. I'm a meditation teacher. We talk about mindfulness all the time. I teach people these tools. And then for myself, it's very difficult, but I just feel like that's just the reality, and I'm okay with it. And I think the duality of it is that I understand how we can get caught up in the busyness of our lives. And that also informs my meditation practice and how I show up into spaces, which I think is also really powerful.
I completely 100% relate to everything you just said. I'm curious, now that you are maybe teaching less group asana class and maybe more sound bath or guided meditation, breath work, do you feel like you are able to continue teaching without exerting your energy as much as you used to? Or do you feel like it's still just as much of a concentration and focus, whether you're actually moving your physical body or not when you're teaching? Is it still the same amount of, you feel like, energy output? Or do you feel like you're able to reserve your energy more from teaching?
I think it's a different type of energy output. When I was teaching lots of yoga asana and lots of yoga classes, it was very much a physical exhaustion. And now that I teach meditation and breathwork and sound, the exhaustion is more of an energetic and emotional. Like an example I can give you is like when I was teaching yoga asana and doing freaking warrior 2 or lunges all week, my hips would just be completely wrecked. And when I'm teaching meditation and sound baths, like mentally, I get to a point where my neural pathways are not firing anymore. My brain does not compute, and it's exhausting. And I just think I've just traded the exhaustion for a different type of exhaustion. I think that there's more ways to remedy the mental exhaustion sometimes for me than the physical exhaustion, especially with yoga when you're stretching your hips and you're in lunges, and it's like, okay, like what are you going to do to remedy that? Like you actually need to just stop doing yoga to remedy. Like you don't need more yoga when you're already giving yourself more yoga. And especially for the mental exhaustion, I can practice the practices and they will help me come back to center. And I feel like that's the two differences between the physical and the mental exhaustion. For me personally, I think the physical exhaustion is much easier to deal with and handle than the mental exhaustion.
That's such a great point that you brought up about when you're teaching asana and doing asana, more asana is not your answer for remedy that. You just have to rest. But with a breathwork or meditation practice, more subtle practice, you need to give yourself more of that to kind of refill. But do you have any specific, or your go-to practices that you might do on a regular that fill up your energy again from exerting it, and both mental and physical? But because you do teach a lot, what are some things you do so you can kind of fill your cup up?
Yeah. Physically, well, I'll talk about the physical first, and then I'll get into like the mental and the energetic. So physically, I've been teaching yoga for a very long time now, and I tend to be very hypermobile. And so what has really helped me feel a lot better in my body is actually strength training and weightlifting, because where I lacked a lot of stability, I would actually get injured. And I feel like this is something that is not really talked about a lot with a lot of yoga teachers. Is like injury is definitely a part of the journey, I think, especially if you teach full time. And I don't want to say like you're going to get injured, but it just tends to naturally happen, especially if you are teaching in a mass quantity. But I actually, a year ago, I threw out my back. I actually had debilitating sacrum pain, which developed into sciatica. And I was at a cross point where I was like, okay, like I might actually have to stop teaching yoga. Not because I don't want to teach yoga anymore, but because my body physically is not well from teaching yoga. And it wasn't until I started working with a physical therapist and remedying my body in a way which I did not normally do, which at the time was strength training. I would pretty much only take yoga classes as my form of physical activity. That was really the thing that helped me balance out my body. And I'm grateful that I kind of have like this duality now, because now when I practice yoga, it just feels so good and so much better. I am the most stable and strong I've ever been in my yoga practice, not taking yoga classes 5 to 6 days a week to now taking yoga classes maybe like once or twice a week. I just feel so much better. So much better. It's hard to describe. And energetically and emotionally, which I find is a little bit more important than the physical. For me, the practices that have really helped me, and I think which is why I've seen such a transition in my life, is breath work. Not necessarily like holotropic or Wim Hof, which I think there's a lot of buzz. I think those practices are great and they have a specific benefit, but they can oftentimes be upregulating for the nervous system, where I tend to be upregulated most of the time. Like I tend to crave down-regulated pranayama or breath work. And so I usually start my morning with like 3 to 5 minutes of just intentional deep breaths, like nothing crazy, just breathing, expanding the capacity of my diaphragm. And it's really powerful because I think we don't even realize that our breath is incredibly shallow. Like we're just breathing into the upper throat and the upper chest. And when you really start to breathe into the belly, which is like your second brain, you really start to like stimulate all of those nerves, those feel good nerves that help you feel calm and settled and relaxed. And for me, that's like the perfect way to start my day. At the end of my day, I found Yoga Nidra in my yoga teacher training, and it is a practice that I continuously practice. It's evolved over time, but Yoga Nidra is a practice, for those of you who don't know, it's oftentimes referred to as yogic sleep, and it involves bringing your awareness to different parts of your body. Really, really, really powerful, not just for meditation, but I think for understanding where energy is kept in the body. And for somebody like me who oftentimes works with people and environments where people are in a sensitive space, they're moving through emotions, oftentimes they're moving through trauma. I have people who are crying, I have people who are convulsing their bodies, I have people who are processing really deep stuff. As somebody who holds space for that, I can really be a sponge. And so at the end of my day, that practice is really the best practice for me to just kind of help somatically like move through a lot of that energy that I tend to take on. And yeah, so breathwork, Yoga Nidra, my favorite. I highly recommend.
Yeah. I love all that you shared. Definitely, I agree with you about strength training. Although I don't have a very flexible, bendy body myself, I already come from more athletic background. So I think my challenge is I could easily become too tight if I'm not being careful. But I love strength training, and I do think it's very valuable to any human being, whether you're a yoga teacher or not, but definitely strength training. I agree with you. And a couple questions that came up to me when you're sharing about your practice. You said because you tend to be more upregulated, you do for yourself, the down-regulating breathing breathwork practice is more helpful to you in your system. When you're teaching breathwork in a class or a corporate setting, are you teaching both down-regulating and up-regulating breathwork to them, or do you find that people need more of one more than other?
So I kind of like took oftentimes what most breathwork classes are taught in, like a specific sequence, which is like holotropic breathing, which is a 3-part breath the entire time. And holotropic is it's an upregulating breathwork. It tends to stimulate the nervous system. I've kind of shifted my practice and my teachings to teach breathwork in a way that is similar to a yoga class, where we start. I like to think of this visualization as like a gradual incline, and you're gumming up the mountain and the intensity starts to build. And as the intensity builds, at one point, you're going to hit the peak of the mountain. We're breathing very intensely, but we also take some time to come back down the mountain and to down regulate. And so that's really kind of how I structure my breathwork classes. So it starts with like a down regulating breath just to help people get into the space, to get into their bodies. And then we kind of shift into these more like active styles of breath work. Eventually we're breathing pretty intensely. We get to this intense peak, and then I always make sure to give people ample time to come down. I found that is just like the way that I like to structure my breathwork classes. I teach a pretty long breathwork class once a week, which is 50 minutes, and 50 minutes is a pretty long time to do breathwork, to be honest with you. And I found when I first started teaching the class that people were not able to maintain a very intense pacing of breath for an extended period of time. And so I've evolved and kind of adapted that class to fit that kind of sequence. And in that process, I was like, okay, I think that this actually works, and it can work for people individual one-on-one or with companies, just because I feel like you need both. Like, we don't need to just be completely calm and relaxed all the time. I also think that we do kind of need to be able to work with our stressors, and how we manage that is really important, especially for people who are working corporate jobs and working jobs that require a lot of high output. How they handle their relationship to stress is really important, which is oftentimes why we facilitate breathwork practices that actually cause a stress response, so people can learn how to manage that in a way that is safe.
Thank you for sharing that. It's very fascinating, because I'm not very used to breathwork class format, although I've been to pranayama class, but I guess, some classes are called pranayama, some breath work. I know some techniques are different. So it seems like the arc just made me really think about how the vinyasa yoga sequence would be, right? We'll slowly warm up the body, and there's usually a peak, whether it's a peak pose or not, there's usually like the peak section of the class. And then there's like a nice cool down that we're like ready for shavasana. So I love to hear that breath work also has a similar arc.
Yes, it does.
And another question that came from your answer was, you said you do yoga nidra at night time. How do you do yoga nidra practice to yourself? Just because I've been to a class where a teacher was leading me into it. When you're doing it yourself, are you just like trying to focus on a specific part of the body, or do you listen to like an audio recording? How do you do that?
Yeah, I actually do it myself. And so I lay down in bed, or if I want to make sure that I'm really getting a full practice, I'll actually do this seated upright, just because when you're laying down, it's very easy to fall asleep. And actually I find good when you're falling asleep in yoga nidra, because that means your nervous system is shifting into that parasympathetic state. But if I want to be focused more on like the somatics of it and the energy of it, I tend to be upright. But usually when I guide myself into my yoga nidra practice, I'll just close my eyes, and then I bring my awareness to my body. And I start from the crown of my head, and I slowly make my way down to each part of the body. And so an example of this would be, I'm bringing my awareness to the crown of my head. Am I holding on to tension here? And I get really curious, inquisitive. I don't really have like a structured way, and I don't think that there really is a wrong way to practice Yoga Nidra, because Yoga Nidra is really just a body awareness practice. And so I make my way across different parts of my body. I focus on my left temple, and then my right temple, and then my forehead. And oftentimes there's really a part where you're like, oh, like I'm holding on to something. And maybe that holding on isn't necessarily something physical. I mean, it might be physical. And oftentimes if it's physical, usually there's an underlying like energetic or an emotion to it. And through this practice, I really get to observe and witness my body as a whole, understanding where I'm holding on to energy, understanding where I'm holding on to tension, and how those two things kind of dance and play a role into our internal state in any given moment. And so I make my way down my entire body, focusing on the left side, then I'll focus on the right side. And usually about halfway through, you kind of get into this transcendent state, and it just starts to become natural, I find, where I'm almost like taking a back seat, and I can almost listen to my awareness, bring my attention and my focus to different parts of my body, and I just kind of witness the experience of Yoga Nidra happening. Really, really, really crazy experience, but also very, very simple at the same time, which is why it's a practice that I've continued to come back to. There's not really crazy visualizations you have to do. I find that it's just very effective and easy for me to drop in. Yeah. I know with meditation specifically, the type of learner that you are can really help identify what meditation styles and practices would really fit best for you. I don't know exactly which one I am, but definitely one that like is present with my body. I'm a fidgety person too. So like giving myself like something to do is very powerful for me.
Thank you for explaining that. That sounds really powerful, fascinating. Definitely want to give it a try. And another thing that I love about you is that you are currently in school to become a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, acupuncturist. And I just love that about you. And I just love that you're pursuing this. So maybe can you share what made you decide to pursue this, to go back to school?
Yeah, so I found Chinese medicine and acupuncture when I was 15. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is a blanket term in the Western medicine perspective, where they cannot diagnose what is wrong with you, but you deal with chronic pain. And so when I was 15, I was in and out of the hospital, was getting blood work done, testing done, and nothing was coming up. I remember sitting in the doctor's office, literally with my joints inflamed, with pain in my entire body, not knowing what is wrong with me, with the doctors telling me, you're absolutely fine. And it wasn't until I actually got a referral from my primary care physician to an acupuncturist that was like my initial eye-opening experience. It's actually very funny because my very first acupuncture treatment was actually at the school that I am enrolled in right now. And after, I remember 2 to 3 sessions of acupuncture, my symptoms started to remit almost completely. And so from 15 to 17, I was really dealing with chronic pain. It wasn't something that I really grappled or got complete control of until I was like 18 or 19. And it's really funny because these two paths have always been connected, because my acupuncturist recommended that I try yoga. And I was like, okay, never heard of it. I mean, I've heard of it, but at the time I was young, 15, come on, 15-year-old. At the time, yoga wasn't as big of a thing as it is now. But that's actually what got me into my first Kundalini yoga class. And so it was really funny because I had this idea that I was going to be teaching yoga full time for the rest of my life. Hard reality set in, maybe year 2, understanding that this is not going to be sustainable. And so I remember when I was 19, I was trying to figure out, like, what do I want to do? Like, what can I see myself doing with my life? And acupuncture was the thing that came up for me. I remember being enrolled in school and my major was psychology, and then my major was business, and then it was marketing. And then, I mean, I'm doing all those things, don't get me wrong, but it finally clicked that I wanted to be an acupuncturist. And with that, I was like, okay, like, how do I get here? How can I get to this goal as quick as I possibly can? I ended up switching my undergrad degree to kinesiology, which with what I'm doing right now was the perfect fit. Kinesiology and yoga and body mechanics, they all work hand in hand. And so I completed that and enrolled in my acupuncture program. I've been enrolled in my program for 2.5 years now. I have a year and a half to go. It's a 4-year master's program. And most likely when I'm done with my master's program, I'm going to continue and do my doctorates as well. And yeah, there's so much that I can say and talk about Chinese medicine. It's just like a black hole of information, like a library of information.
Wow. I think it's so amazing that you're pursuing this. And also me witnessing you juggling both teaching and all this, clients, private, corporate you have, and you're still in school, and you're in school full time.
Yeah, I'm in school full time.
Yeah. And I love seeing you do this and pursue that career path. It's traditional Chinese medicine, something I'm also very fascinated in. So it just, it makes me very excited to see you pursuing it. And has it changed your teaching in any way, or do you incorporate anything you learn in your traditional Chinese medicine school into your teaching?
Absolutely. I think it has allowed me to understand anatomy way more and the body mechanisms. I also think that Chinese medicine gives you a system to kind of understand how the body works from an energy standpoint, but it gives you a framework to really help translate some of these like experiences that we have internally into a tangible experience. One of my favorite yoga styles to teach is yin yoga, and yin yoga is based off Chinese medicine. It's based off the meridian system and the yin aspects of the body, which are your fascia, your connective tissues, as opposed to the yang aspects of the body, which are your musculature, the external parts of your body. It's crazy because I feel like it's changed the way that I've taught so much, but it's also like, it's hard to see until I take a step back and look at my yoga teaching as a whole. A lot of Chinese medicine is also focused on hormone regulation, and we have a lot of conversation on how your different organs are correlated to your emotions and how these kind of play into the role of disease. And I think with a practice like yoga, which involves you really dropping into the body, tuning into how you feel, it really described a lot of like the transcendent experiences I would have with yoga, which have really allowed me to process some heavy emotions, to release somatically. It made me realize that like these things are like very normal. And there's a framework that has been around for thousands of years to help me understand this. And with that being said, these experiences have really impacted the way that I teach. And it has made me be an advocate of how yoga is not just something that is this physical practice. Like yoga really transcends this and is a practice that allows you to connect to your emotions and your energy and your nervous system. Like there's just so many like things and words that we can say to like label this experience, but it's an experience. And I think that more people should understand and know about. I think I went on a tangent there, but
no, I love it. I love it. That's so fascinating. And I'm sure not only has impacted your teaching or evolved your teaching, I'm sure it also has impacted your life and how you see life and how you interact with the world. So it's such a a rich tradition with, like you said, a black hole. There's just so much knowledge there. It's amazing. So you're in school and you're also teaching both private and group and corporate yoga. How are you finding balance, juggling those things together?
Yeah, if I'm gonna be completely honest, Like, balance is not something I achieve. I think it's a teeter-totter. And if balance is a line that draws the middle, I tend to be swinging from left to right, sometimes around the center, sometimes very far to the left, sometimes very far to the right. And I think as I move through juggling a lot of these tasks, it's just really understanding like what is the most important thing for me to focus on in any given moment. And at the end of the day, anytime I find myself really kind of veering off the path, I have to remember that I always have like these practices, whether it be yoga or meditation or breath work. And even now, since I'm in acupuncture school, I am acupuncturing myself all the time. I'm taking herbs to balance my hormones, to help me stay regulated. And it's really a double-edged sword. I tell all my friends about it, where I am my own patient. And whenever there is an imbalance, whether it's in one of my organs or my hormones, immediately I know. And when I first started my program, it was very much like, oh my God, what's going on? And now I'm like, okay, I know what's going on. And oftentimes I know I have the solution, but it just takes some time to really like work through a lot of these situations. And I found that stressing myself out more about these things causes me to be more stressed, which also causes disease. And so at the end of the day, I really just try my best and utilize and lean on the practices that I have. And I feel like, especially somebody who is going to move into the work of facilitating healing and facilitating this medicine for people, like understanding that we can't be balanced all the time, but also knowing where we need to pull back when we need to, where we need to put energy where we need to. Because at the end of the day, we are taking care of ourselves, and this is the body that we get to have as we move through life, and we can only try our best to take care of it, which is, I feel, what we all try to do. We just get too caught up in the busyness of life and the to-do list and all the tasks that we have.
Thank you. I love that the pendulum image, that we're aiming for balance, but a lot of time we're swinging from one to the next, and sometimes we're more to the right, sometimes we're more to the left, but we're just trying to come back to center. But center might not be where we are all the time, and that's life. So you have some group classes, private, corporate. Do you have any other streams of income? And also maybe if you can tell me, I guess in percentage, like how much is your group classes income, and then like how much is it mostly from private? Like what's your schedule breaking up to be like, to kind of being able to support yourself now?
Yeah, so I have multiple streams of income. I teach at 3 different yoga studios. I teach at one gym. So these are all of like my group classes. So I teach at 4 different places. My group classes really are not the majority of my income anymore. I want to say they're about 10% of my income. I have a virtual studio, and so it's a subscription-based model. I collect a certain amount of money every single month for everybody who is subscribed. And here I post all of my yoga classes, meditations. I host virtual events every single month, which people have the option of either paying to attend, or it's included in the virtual studio, which I think is really good, because I found, especially with this work, it can get kind of expensive, and I really wanted to give people an affordable option to be able to access a library of meditation, to be able to access being in community with a bunch of people, whether it's in person or virtually via Zoom. And one thing that I do with my virtual studio is, if you are enrolled in my virtual studio, you can use that $25 off for any of my events. So you saying I have an event for $40, you can use a $25 off and you can come to that event for $15. Or if you book a private session with me, which a lot of people on my virtual studio book one-on-one sessions with me, they can use that $25 off towards their session. So basically this $25 pays for itself if you decide to do a sound bath, or if you decide to do a session, because then you get the session and then you get access to all of the other materials that I have on there. And then the majority of my income comes from my corporate partnerships. So I partner with a few different companies Sometimes I partner with companies on just one-off events, and I have, let's see, 4 different corporate clients that I work with consistently every single week. And that's a big majority of my income. And then I have individual clients I work with, and I see maybe 5 to 6 people every single week. And sometimes it varies depending on vacations, if they're out of town, et cetera, et cetera. And then I have retreats. I also facilitate retreats. I tend to do retreats quarterly. That's something that I started 2 years ago, and I found a lot of success with, and I really love just holding like those containers for people. I also host group events for myself and my own business, which are usually breathwork and sound. I host new moon and full moon events every single month. I've been hosting them at a crystal shop in Whittier for the past 3 years, and I've been there ever since. And then I also have private clients that book me for group sound baths. Like I did a baby shower last week. I did a bridal shower 2 weeks ago. I have people who book me for birthdays, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of stuff.
Yeah.
And then sometimes companies will just pay me to do events. And yeah.
I love it.
I don't know how many streams of income that is, but it's definitely a lot.
Yeah.
And like completely off topic from teaching yoga, it's like I teach one HIIT workout class a week on Monday nights, which is like a hobby that I picked up, and I felt like I just needed something to like break up my normalcy a little bit. It's funny because I teach meditation pretty much every day, and then on Monday nights I'm like yelling into a microphone. But I really love it. I honestly love it so much.
I love that you could teach HIIT class. I had no idea. That sounds amazing. I think it's a good, nice contrast from other work that you do. So for your virtual yoga studio, I know you host a virtual event and you give discount to anybody who want to come to your live event or virtual, but is it mostly a pre-recorded content you're putting out into your virtual yoga studio, or do you also have like a weekly Zoom live classes that you teach?
Yeah, so the events that I facilitate are live, and for those people who cannot attend live, they also can access a copy of the session recorded in the feed. So if you're able to attend live, which I absolutely love because it's always nice to just kind of have that connected energy with a person presently, whether it's virtual or in person. But then if you are busy and the times don't work for you, you can still access the material on the feed. That's just the event side. And then I post pre-recorded meditations, breathwork, yoga classes on there as well.
And how often are you adding new classes on there?
At first, when I started, I was adding classes every week, and now I'm adding classes maybe about once a month.
And I'm curious, you have a lot of private that you said you have during the week. Is that mostly sound, bath, and breath work, or do you also do yoga, asana, private clients as well?
Yeah, 3 out of those 5 to 6 private clients are yoga and sound, and then the other clients are breathwork and sound.
And how was the shift like? I know you said it kind of came naturally from teaching yoga, only yoga in the beginning of your teaching career, to becoming more adding in breath work and sound bath. And it seems like now you maybe do a little more of the sound bath and breath work than yoga asana. So how was that shift like? And is that a conscious shift that you were trying to make in your career, or did it happen naturally?
I remember when I first started facilitating sound baths, and it was something I consciously wanted to move into, but it definitely took a lot of time to even get there. I used to have partnerships with yoga studios and try to host events, and I remember for like 6 months to a year not even having people sign up for any of my events or sound baths. And that was very like, of course, like, punch in the stomach, because you want to be successful and you feel like it will come right away. And I think at the time I was like, I have sound bowls, please come to me. That's definitely how I felt. But that wasn't the case. And so it was a very slow progression. But there's also this saying, it's like sometimes change happens overnight. And I feel like since I stayed committed to it now for 4 to 5 years, that change has definitely happened, where now like my life has completely changed courses, and this is the work that I'm pretty much doing full time. I never expected to be where I'm at or to be doing the things that I'm doing. I just have always followed what I felt was right. And a big part of like my work and how I kind of figure out like events and workshops and retreats is really sitting with like the energy of a space that I'm going to be holding and what can I offer here for people? Like what not tangible thing, but like energetic sensation or feeling can I offer to the clients that are going to be coming to me? And oftentimes it's really just channeled. I'll close my eyes and think, okay, like what is the intention of this container that I'm going to be holding? And oftentimes that's correlated with astrology and what's going on in the new moon or the full moon or what's going on collectively. I remember I've been hosting a New Year's Eve sound bath at Raw for the past 3 years. And that's always like, that's like the most intense and energetically event I have all year. And I always just think like, okay, like I'm holding this space for a lot of people who are undergoing a transition in their life. Like collectively, we feel a transition. Even though I believe that the new year starts around Chinese New Year, still in this Gregorian calendar, that is the day where a lot of people feel this energy. And so really holding space for that energy, which is a lot of like shedding the past and calling in the new, getting clear about the why behind the work that I offer, to me, always allows things to become more successful. Not necessarily like the marketing behind it, but really like the integrity and the intention of the container. It's always happens the way that it's supposed to happen. Let me just say, sometimes I have events where it's just a few people and it's always perfect. Sometimes I have events where it's like, oh my God, we're packed wall to wall. And like, those are great too, but they all have a specific energy. And it's really interesting to kind of just like see how those kind of play out.
Yeah, I love hearing that, really tapping into that energy. Sometime with yoga too, I could come in with teaching, like intention of teaching. Okay, this is the focus of the class I'm teaching. I'm going to focus on this. And, you know, I don't usually have a perfectly detailed set sequence when I teach, but I have an intention of what I'm bringing that day and kind of adjust depending on who's in the room. But sometimes just like even at the beginning of the class, just closing eyes and really like tuning into the energy of the room, energy of myself. And when I can really tap into that, I can almost feel the teaching come through me, not from me. And that's something, Absolutely. A quote from Judith Lathiter. It's not my quote, but it's so true. When you can really tap in, you're just this like vessel that teaching is coming through you, rather than just like me trying to force out of me, you know? Yeah, I love that. That's so beautiful.
You become a channel of the space, like really, like, and like there's a like it's hard to describe, and it's a certain perspective, but I really feel like when you become aware, right, of the container that you're holding for people, like you become this vessel, and you really have a lot of insight on your students, on the people who you're surrounded by, and you really get to just tap into like the knowing of like what is right in this moment.
Yes, beautifully said. If necessary, could you fully support yourself financially through your full-time yoga teaching career?
Now, yes. But for the first 4 to 5 years, no. It has taken a long time and a lot of hard work. And I used to struggle with like, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to have food? Like, I remember so many nights where I would cry from pure exhaustion. And it took like all those experiences to be able to understand like how I can do this, right? And continuing on, the amount of times I've wanted to throw in the towel and quit is way more than I can count on both of my hands. But I think when you're really like of service, like you will always be taken care of. And oftentimes we can get caught up in the story of not enoughness or lack. And I have to remind myself that it's just a story, you know, like even when I look back at those periods of my life, I can now see where the abundance was. Maybe it wasn't in a financial perspective, but I was definitely fulfilled in other ways. But I do think in order to really be of service and to do the work that we do, like we deserve to have like a living wage, which is something that I am incredibly passionate about. And I feel like we have some mutual friends. I'm sure we talk about this a lot. It's like we provide a service that transcends not just the physical, but also the emotional, the energetic, and even the spiritual if you're into that. And it's valuable. And it's why yoga is $1 billion industry, which is crazy because the people who are at the forefront of this industry are oftentimes the people who are not getting paid.
Wow. Yes. Oh my God. Thank you for saying that. So true that people at the forefront of this industry, like you said, are barely making living wage with the classes that we teach. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. It's so true. And I'm very happy for you that you are now financially sustainable with the money that you make, and you are making what you deserve, and all the time and effort you put into it, you deserve all of that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Was there any challenges along the way in your teaching career, or maybe mistakes that you've made that you learned from that you want to share with the listeners?
I think of the biggest challenge and maybe the biggest mistake was like thinking I know it all. And the more I learned, I felt at a time, the more I felt like knowledgeable. And now I feel like the more I learn, the less I know. And trying to fit people into a box of like alignment and postures and how things quote unquote should be, like I've just like let all of that go. Which, not to say that alignment it doesn't serve a purpose, but I think especially when you're teaching group yoga classes, like we have to think about like what is the why behind all of these postures. And when we're teaching somebody 50 postures in an hour, like do we really need to be like the yoga police? And how can we conduct an environment that flows, but also where we're not controlling or even dogmatic, like with our teachings? And I think for me, that was one of the biggest realizations, like letting go of the control. Yeah. And also the second thing would be consistency in the practice, whether that is the yoga practice, the meditation practice, the breathwork practice. I went through a long period of just teaching, like I want to say at least a year of just teaching, not practicing, just teaching. And I started to fall out of love with yoga. And I remember taking a class as a student at a yoga studio I did not work at, because that's a whole nother thing. And having a moment like, oh, this is why I fell in love with yoga. But you get kind of lost in it when you're a teacher, and it becomes something that you're doing for money, right? I feel like, especially as a yoga teacher, we all get into yoga, I personally think, because we're passionate about what it has done for us in some aspect. But when you start to get caught up with the like, how am I going to survive? And all of this, like, you know, like tense and difficult energy, you really start to lose the sight of why you first fell in love with it, which is kind of like relationships, you know? And so for me, it was consistently putting the energy and the effort back into the practice, and also not having it have to be a certain way, like practicing for 10 minutes, not having it be a full yoga practice is still okay, you know? Laying in Supta Baddha Konasana, reclined butterfly in my bed for 5 minutes out of a day, like that's still practicing yoga. Taking a breath before I yell at the person while I'm driving, that's still practicing yoga. And I think I used to get caught up in the, I need to have a 60-minute practice. I need to have it look this way. I need to have it feel this way. I think letting go of all that. At the root, I think, of everything that I'm telling you is just like letting go of the control. Letting go of the control.
Yeah, thank you. That's very wise advice for everyone to hear, including myself. And was there any point in your teaching? I feel like in the beginning, you feel like you don't know anything and you start doing continuing education because you feel like you don't know enough. And was there any point in your teaching that you felt like, oh, I think I got it now? And we will never get fully, but was there a certain point that you feel like you weren't a beginner teacher anymore? You understand or you feel confident in your teaching?
Yes, absolutely. I have assisted the 200-hour teacher training at Raw twice. And the second time, after sitting in those anatomy lectures for the third time, and this is just like a testament to like how long it takes for that information to like marinate and settle in. I remember the trainees asking me questions about the asana and me responding. And I think in the process of me responding, I almost had a realization of like, oh, wow, I didn't even realize like those dots have connected in my mind that's my understanding of like how these mechanisms work with one another. And I think for me also like being in school to be a Chinese doctor and diving into more anatomy and getting a degree in kinesiology, like the practice of the awareness of the body never stopped at the 200-hour or even in the continued education. It like continued, and it's still continuing as I go through this program and I look at people's bodies every single day while I'm sticking acupuncture needles in them and seeing these different postural imbalances and different hip sizes and lengths of femur bones, lengths of arm bones. And I think understanding that there is no one size fits all, and like kind of what I was talking about, like letting go of that control and like also applying that like with the knowledge that I have of like, okay, like I understand the mechanisms of how the body moves, but I don't need it to like look a certain way. I just need to understand. And I feel like it's just easy for me to understand now, like when I teach my private clients and I work one-on-one, which is very different than teaching a group class, because I really get to focus specifically on the specific needs of my clients. And now I feel like I was almost not even equipped to teach private clients when I first started teaching them because I didn't have the knowledge. Because what you're going to teach in a group class is not what you're going to teach a private client at all. Oftentimes, now I don't even plan anything that I teach. I'm like, okay, like what's happening here? How are we all doing before I start to make definitives of like, it should look like this. We should do this, you know?
And you said that point in that second teacher training you assisted. How many years was that since your first 200 to that point?
Yes, the last teacher training I assisted was right before the pandemic. So it was 2 years, 2 years. And for those 2 years, I took so many different trainings.
Yes.
I was in pretty much school in continuing education the entire time. And if I wasn't in continuing education, I was assisting the 200 hours.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Because I think that's one of the questions I get asked a lot about new teachers. They're like, how long did it take for you to feel more confident? And everyone's different. But I feel like most people I ask, it's like 2 to 3 years. And it also depends on how much you've been teaching in that 2 to 3 years as well, and how much continuing education you've done during that 2 to 3 years. Another question I have is, what is something you love about being a full-time yoga teacher, and what is something you find it most challenging, or maybe you don't like as much about being a full-time yoga teacher?
I think I love being able to connect with people. And this is just one example of why I love it, but I also teach prenatal yoga. And I have seen multiple mamas go through their pregnancies, and I've seen some mamas, I've seen their first child, I'm now seeing their second child, their third child, and just witnessing the effects that yoga has on people is really profound. And I think, like I said, like we all find yoga for a certain reason, but seeing kind of like the magic happen in front of your eyes, like it's normal for me to see that. But then like if I take a step back and think like, why do I do what I do? Like, these are the things that come to my mind, like seeing like moms have their babies and supporting them through their pregnancy, or seeing students have light bulbs go off, or aha moments, like, you know, it's really like, I could almost cry like talking about it. Just, I'm sure you've experienced it too. And I think a lot of the people who have been teaching for so long, like, it really is like a labor of love. Like, we do it because we love it and we love what we do. And that's what's kept us in it for so long. And I can honestly probably see myself teaching yoga till I'm well old and can barely not teach yoga anymore. What I don't necessarily love about teaching yoga full time is the wear and tear on the body. It's very much like donating your body for another person's experience, whether I'm demoing a posture or constructing a class. Like, all of that is for another person. And I think it can get really caught up in the of service that I oftentimes, and I'm speaking for myself and maybe for a few other people, like, forget to do that for myself. And, you know, when we're teaching, we just kind of throw ourselves into the posture. We kind of just like demo alignment and then expect people to just like follow us. And I think that, like, we don't get to breathe. Oftentimes we don't get to focus on our form. And actually, that was the thing that caused me to have debilitating sacrum pain. And I threw out my back, and I'm dealing with like my hip joint is like gets inflamed all the time from like overstretching. And so those are the things that I really don't love about it. And also, like, we don't get health insurance. Like, the hard reality of it is that, like, we have to pay for health insurance. I turned 26 last week. And the reality of it is that for me to stay on my health insurance, I have to pay $500 in America. And $500 is, rough estimate, like multiple yoga classes, like way more classes than I teach on my schedule right now. And so for me to even maintain like my well-being, I have to almost sacrifice my well-being even more to afford it, which is the hard reality of it, you know? And I have so many friends who teach full time and they don't have health insurance because it's so inaccessible.
Thank you for shedding light on that aspects of yoga teaching. It's maybe it's not always a rainbow and butterfly. Yeah, like, we use our body for our career, and there's not even a health insurance that is provided for us for doing this. So yeah, definitely thanks for bringing that up. And yeah, that is true. Another question I have for you is, what does success mean to you as a teacher, as a yoga teacher?
I feel like success at one point in my career used to mean like a financial gain. And now for me, it's fulfillment and almost balance. Like, the fact that fulfillment comes from having balance in my life. Like, this is something that I struggle with. And I think for me, especially teaching yoga full time, like, one of the gifts of teaching yoga is that, like, I can enjoy my experiences with like my family and my friends and have more time for self-realization and self-discovery, because I'm not caught up in a 40-hour work week. I get time to actually meditate. I get time to actually take care of my body. I get time to cook myself food and take things slow and be present. And it's not like that all the time, but there definitely is a privilege that comes from from being a yoga teacher, where I get to almost live a lifestyle that allows me to take care of myself in these ways.
I love that. And now that I know you have teaching, and also you are in school for acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, and you will eventually graduate, whether you keep going or not. Where do you see your teaching going in the future? And I'm kind of curious of, how are you thinking about combining TCM and yoga, or maybe you are wanting to put more effort into the traditional Chinese medicine practice than yoga. So I'm curious, where do you see your future self?
Yeah, this is a big conversation that I've been having with myself lately. And I know kind of the direction that I want to go in. And I'm always going to teach yoga. I think just the capacity of how I'm going to teach yoga is going to be different. To have, and I'm saying this because I'm like, this is the first time I'm actually really talking about it publicly, but I want to have a breathwork teacher training, and I also want to have a yin yoga teacher training. And those are the two things that I'm incredibly passionate about. And I feel like I have so much to say. And I think Chinese medicine really complements these two practices very, very well. And I've been working on the trainings, but the more my knowledge expands and evolves while I'm in school, so does the content of these trainings. And this is something I've thought about for like 3 years already. And it's hard for me to continue to work on it because as I continue to work on it, it continuously evolves. And I'm sure it's going to continuously evolve over time. But that's definitely the avenue in which I want to continue my teaching, just because I feel like the knowledge of the blend of the two is so profound, and you don't necessarily need to have a very in-depth understanding of Chinese medicine to apply some of these principles and practices to the practice of yoga. I think that they go hand in hand, and conveying that to future yoga teachers and even teachers who are already teaching yoga is something I'm incredibly passionate about. And I think I have a lot of conversation around it in my life, which is funny because I obviously am involved with the teacher training at Raw, and I get to have conversations with a lot of new teachers. And a lot of times these are questions that come up organically. And so it was one of those things where like the path was shown to me through experiences in my life, and it just feels right. And it feels like I'm moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I love that. That feels really aligned with you. So I'm happy that you actually verbalized it, said it. Sometimes saying it out loud is scary, but
It is. I feel scared.
Yeah. But saying it out loud, there's so much power to that. There's a lot of power in our words, and putting it out there in the universe. We're almost like planting seeds already, you know? So thank you for saying that. I'm glad you said it out loud. Is there anything else you want to say before I ask you how people can find you? But is there anything else that maybe the question I didn't ask, or anything you want to share?
I feel like just follow your heart. I feel like that is the only thing I have to say. It will always lead you to where you need to be, whether that's the darkness or whether it's the light. It will always make sense when you're looking at it from the place you are now, taking a look back at that past version of yourself. I feel like everything happens for a reason. And as cliche as that sounds, you don't realize that until you are standing from the space where you are currently at today, taking a look at all of the experience you've had, and you can kind of see like, okay, the dominoes fell to get me to where I am. And yeah, that's it.
I love it. Thank you. That's such a beautiful closing words. So how can people find you? Do you have any, website, social media you want to share? And if there's any upcoming offerings you want to share with the listener?
Yeah, so my Instagram, Darren Obong, I post pretty much all of my stuff on there, but my website, darrenobong.com, it's just my name.com. That is really like the source of all of my information. I have an email list, and my email list is really where I communicate with people the most. Social media is kind of secondary. It's very hard to upkeep that. But people who are signed up for my email list, they get all of the information on what's going on in my life, whether it be like my offerings or events or retreats. So yeah, that is the best place to be connected with me. I have a retreat with our mutual friend Karen in May, and this is going to be in Temecula, and it's at a retreat center. So we're really excited because we're used to just hosting smaller, more intimate retreats at a house. But May 17th to 20th, we are hosting a retreat together, and we are very excited. There are 2 spots available, 2 spots. And so it's almost completely sold out, but that is the next like excursion, big thing happening in my life. So yeah, I'm so excited for it.
How exciting. And it's amazing. You already only have 2 spots left, and definitely I have a feeling when this podcast is released, it might be already full.
Yeah.
Because it filled up pretty fast. This is, I know, second time around you and Karen is leading a retreat. And, I hear such an amazing thing. I've seen photos of your previous one. It looks really fun. So I'm so happy that you two are collaborating, partnering to do this together. Well, I'll put all the links to the show notes. Thank you so much, Darren, for this wonderful conversation. I'm sure I gain a lot out of it. I'm much inspired from your stories and what you shared, and I'm sure the listeners will be also very inspired from your stories.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was so nice to connect with you.
Thanks. I hope you enjoyed the conversation I had with Darren. It was so lovely to speak to him. As you can hear, he has this grounded voice and he speaks so beautifully that I really enjoyed hearing his journey, as well as his challenges and success and his passion, his dreams in this yoga world. I really, really resonated with how he used to teach so many different classes, and now he was able to find somewhat of a balance that feels right for him. But exactly what he said, balance is not something we can attain, but we are always kind of swinging from right to left, always looking for balance, looking for that centeredness. And we may not always be in that centered, balanced place, but we just are moving back and forth, trying to achieve balance as much as we can in what life is happening at the time. So I really appreciate all of that. I also really felt strongly about how he said, we are the forefront of this industry and a lot of the yoga teachers are not even making a living wage, and how that needs to change. So definitely I share the same passion with him in regards to that. We deserve a living wage as a yoga teacher, and also health insurance, retirement, 401k would be nice. Maybe that's for another topic. That'll be an interesting topic to talk about, maybe with somebody else, some expert, because that's another question I had as a young new teacher was, how do I think about my future as a yoga teacher in terms of financial security? It can be hard to think when we're just, trying to get by. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed Darren's interview as much as I did. Before we say goodbye, I want to remind you about my virtual mentorship that is starting in May until end of August. If you're interested, the link to my website and link to the application will be on the show notes. I want to end with one of the testimonial from my participant in my mentorship group. She says that Reika is truly one of the most authentic, brilliant, and just warm and wonderful people I know. As someone who has been through many different yoga trainings under various organizations, I can honestly say that Reika's mentorship program is the most comprehensive, informative, and maybe most importantly, inclusive in which I participated to date. She put significant effort into each aspect of her program teaching. Philosophy talks, guest speaker, and even opportunities for cueing and adjustment workshops and practice teaching. I could keep writing the many fantastic things about her and her offerings, but we'll end by saying, do yourself a favor and invest in your personal or professional development as a yoga student and or yoga teacher with her. You won't be disappointed. So thank you so much for leaving this review and testimonial. And I hope you can join my mentorship group that is starting in May. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. My Instagram is @ReikaYoga, website www.reikayoga.com. And I will speak to you next week. Have a great day.